Chapter 1. Chapter 1. A Day in the Park. The sun had shone brightly in the previous chapter, illuminating the laughter and camaraderie shared among Brad, Liv, Mary-Kate, Caitlin, Ashley, and Paige. They had gathered at the park, a sanctuary of vibrant flowers and towering trees, where the air was thick with the scent of blooming lilacs and freshly cut grass. As they lounged on the grass, secrets were shared, and bonds were deepened, but beneath the surface of their joy, unspoken tensions simmered, hinting at the complexities of their relationships. Now, as they ventured deeper into the park, the atmosphere shifted, and dark clouds began to gather ominously overhead. The park was alive with the sounds of a perfect spring day. Birds chirped merrily from the branches above, their songs weaving through the air like a gentle breeze. The sun cast a warm glow on the group as they strolled along the winding path, the vibrant colors of tulips and daffodils dancing in the light. Brad walked slightly ahead, his hands tucked into the pockets of his jeans, a casual confidence radiating from him. Liv, with her sun-kissed hair cascading over her shoulders, walked beside him, her laughter ringing out like music. "Do you remember that time we tried to make a picnic and ended up with ants in everything?" Liv teased, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Brad chuckled, glancing back at the others. "I still have nightmares about that sandwich. I swear it was more ant than bread." Mary-Kate, who was walking with Caitlin and Ashley, chimed in, "And I remember you swatting at them like a madman. It was like watching a bad slapstick comedy." Caitlin laughed, her voice light and airy. "You were so determined to save that sandwich, Brad. I thought you were going to dive into the grass to rescue it." "Hey, it was a gourmet sandwich," Brad protested, feigning indignation. "You don't just let that go to waste." Paige, trailing slightly behind, rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a smile. "You guys are ridiculous. Next time, let's just stick to chips and soda." As they continued walking, the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the path. The laughter and playful banter filled the air, but a subtle shift began to creep in, like the first hint of a storm on the horizon. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves overhead, and the once bright blue sky darkened, clouds gathering ominously. "Looks like we might get some rain," Ashley remarked, glancing up at the sky. Her brow furrowed slightly, a hint of concern in her voice. "Just a little sprinkle," Brad said, waving his hand dismissively. "We'll be fine. We've got time." But Liv's gaze lingered on the clouds, a frown forming on her lips. "I don't know, Brad. It looks pretty serious. Maybe we should head back." "Come on, Liv," Brad said, his tone light but with an edge of insistence. "We've barely started our day. Let's enjoy it while we can." Mary-Kate stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. "I mean, it is a beautiful day. We could find a spot to sit and just enjoy the moment. If it rains, we can always run for cover. Or we could just make a run for it now," Caitlin suggested, her eyes darting nervously to the darkening sky. "Where's your sense of adventure?" Brad teased, nudging Caitlin playfully. "Besides, I've got a plan. I know a great spot by the lake where we can set up and have some fun." Paige, who had been quiet, finally spoke up. "I think we should listen to Liv. It's better to be safe than sorry." Brad's smile faltered for a moment, and Liv caught the flicker of disappointment in his eyes. "Come on, guys. Just a little longer," he pleaded, his voice softening. "Let's not let a few clouds ruin our day." The group exchanged glances, the tension palpable. Liv felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had always admired Brad's adventurous spirit, but today, something felt off. The storm brewing in the distance mirrored the unease she felt within her. "Okay, but just for a little while longer," she relented, her voice barely above a whisper. As they walked, the air grew heavier, and the scent of rain mingled with the floral notes surrounding them. The laughter faded slightly, replaced by an undercurrent of uncertainty. They reached the lake, its surface shimmering under the fading light, but the dark clouds loomed closer, casting an eerie shadow over the water. "See. This is perfect," Brad said, his enthusiasm returning as he gestured to the grassy area by the lake. "We can sit here for a bit, and if it rains, we'll just run back." Mary-Kate plopped down on the grass, her carefree spirit shining through. "I'm in. This is beautiful." Caitlin hesitated, glancing back at the path they had come from. "I don't know, guys. It really looks like it is going to pour." "Just relax," Brad said, his voice warm and inviting. "We're here now. Let's enjoy it." Liv settled down beside Mary-Kate, but her heart raced as she watched the clouds swirl ominously overhead. She could feel the tension in the air, a mix of excitement and dread. As the group settled in, the atmosphere shifted again, the playful banter giving way to a more serious undertone. "Hey, can I ask you guys something?" Ashley said, breaking the silence. Her tone was suddenly serious, and the group turned to her, curiosity piqued. "Sure, what's up?" Brad asked, leaning forward, his interest evident. Ashley hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "Do you ever think about what happens after college? Like, where we'll all end up?" The question hung in the air, heavy and charged. Liv felt a pang of anxiety at the thought. The future loomed like the storm clouds above, uncertain and daunting. "I try not to think about it," Caitlin admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's scary." Mary-Kate nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I guess we all have our dreams, but it is hard to know if they'll come true." Brad's brow furrowed, and he leaned back on his hands, staring at the sky. "I think we'll all find our way. We're a good team, right? We've got each other." "Yeah, but what if that's not enough?" Liv blurted out, her heart racing. The words slipped from her lips before she could stop them, and the group fell silent, the weight of her confession settling over them. "What do you mean?" Paige asked, her eyes searching Liv's face. Liv swallowed hard, her throat dry. "I mean, what if we all go our separate ways?" Chapter 2. Chapter 2. The storm hits. The sun had been shining brightly just moments before, casting a warm glow over the park where Brad, Liv, Mary-Kate, Caitlin, Ashley, and Paige had gathered. Laughter echoed among the vibrant flowers and tall trees, their carefree banter a testament to their close-knit friendship. But as they strolled along the winding path, dark clouds had rolled in, ominous and heavy, hinting at the chaos that was about to unfold. Now, the sky had turned a deep, brooding gray, and the air was thick with tension. "Did anyone check the weather?" Caitlin shouted over the rising wind, her voice laced with a mix of concern and disbelief. "I thought it was supposed to be clear all day," Ashley replied, her eyes darting nervously toward the horizon where jagged flashes of lightning danced. "Let's find shelter," Liv urged, her heart racing as she glanced at Brad, who stood a few paces ahead, his expression shifting from amusement to alarm. Before they could react, the first crack of thunder split the air, a deafening roar that sent a jolt of fear through the group. The storm had arrived with a ferocity that felt almost alive, the wind howling like a wild beast as rain began to pour in torrents, drenching them in seconds. "Run!" Mary-Kate screamed, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of nature's fury. They sprinted toward the nearest tree, but the wind whipped around them, pushing them back as if the storm itself were trying to keep them from escaping. Brad, ever the brave one, pushed ahead, his determination palpable. "We can make it to the pavilion," he shouted, pointing toward a distant structure barely visible through the sheets of rain. But just as they turned to follow him, A blinding flash illuminated the sky, and in that split second, everything changed. Brad. Liv's scream pierced through the chaos as she watched him stagger, his body convulsing as a bolt of lightning struck him, a brilliant arc of electricity that seemed to freeze time. The world around them fell silent, the storm's roar replaced by a deafening stillness. The rain continued to pour, but it felt distant, muted, as if they were trapped in a bubble of disbelief. Is he? Paige's voice trembled, her eyes wide with horror. I don't know. Ashley gasped, her hands covering her mouth as she fought against the urge to cry. Brad collapsed to the ground, his body twitching as if caught in the throes of a nightmare. The friends rushed to his side, their hearts pounding in unison, the reality of the situation crashing down on them like the relentless rain. Brad. Can you hear me? Liv knelt beside him, her fingers trembling as she brushed his hair from his forehead, her heart racing with fear. He blinked, his eyes unfocused, and for a moment, it seemed as if he were staring into another world. Liv. He croaked, his voice barely above a whisper. Stay with us, please. She pleaded, her voice breaking as she grasped his hand tightly, willing him to respond. The storm raged on, but in that moment, it felt as though time had stopped. The air was electric, charged with an energy that was both terrifying and surreal. Someone call for help. Mary-Kate shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. I'll do it. Caitlin fumbled for her phone, her fingers slick with rain as she struggled to dial. Come on, come on. But as she pressed the screen, the phone flickered and died, the storm's fury seemingly draining the life from their devices. Brad, please. Liv's voice was a desperate whisper now, her heart aching as she watched the color drain from his face. I'm okay, he managed to say, though the words sounded like a fragile promise. Just a little shocked. Shocked. Ashley echoed incredulously, her eyes wide with disbelief. You were just struck by lightning. I think I'm fine, he insisted, though his voice was weak, and the tremor in his hands betrayed him. The storm began to shift, the wind dying down as if it were losing interest in their plight. The rain, once a torrential downpour, turned into a gentle patter, creating a surreal backdrop to the chaos that had just unfolded. Is it over? Paige whispered, her voice trembling as she looked around, half expecting the storm to return with a vengeance. I don't know, Liv replied, her gaze locked on Brad, who was slowly regaining his composure. But we need to get him to a hospital. Now. I can walk, Brad insisted, pushing himself up on shaky arms. Really, I'm fine. Fine. Mary-Kate scoffed, her voice laced with disbelief. You were just hit by lightning. You need to see a doctor. I'm serious, he said, his voice firmer now, though the effort made him wince. I just need a minute. The group exchanged worried glances, the tension palpable as they weighed their options. Let's just sit for a moment, Liv suggested, her voice softening as she looked into Brad's eyes, searching for reassurance. We'll figure it out together. As they huddled together beneath the shelter of the tree, the storm's remnants lingered in the air, a heavy silence settling over them. The world felt different now, as if the very fabric of reality had shifted. Do you think it is really over? Caitlin asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, Ashley replied, her brow furrowed in concern. But we should stay alert. Just in case. Brad leaned back against the tree, his breathing steadying as he closed his eyes for a moment. I'm really okay, he murmured, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Okay. Liv echoed, her heart aching for him. You were just struck by lightning, Brad. You can't just brush that off. I know, he admitted, opening his eyes to meet her gaze. But I'm still here, right? That has to count for something. Yeah, but, Liv hesitated, her heart racing as she searched for the right words. What if it happens again? What if? Stop, he interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. Let's not think about that right now. We need to focus on getting out of here. The group fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. They were all thinking the same thing. What if the storm wasn't truly over? As the last remnants of rain dripped from the leaves above, the tension in the air shifted, morphing into something heavier, more profound. Brad, Mary-Kate began, her voice trembling. You're not okay. Chapter 3. Chapter 3. Calling for help. The storm had come out of nowhere, a sudden tempest that transformed the sunlit park into a chaotic battleground of wind and rain. Brad, their steadfast friend, had been struck by lightning, a surreal moment that left Caitlin, Ashley, Liv, Mary-Kate, and Paige frozen in disbelief. As the storm receded, the air hung heavy with an eerie silence, punctuated only by the distant rumble of thunder fading into the horizon. Now, with Brad lying motionless on the ground, the weight of their reality pressed down on them like the dark clouds that had just passed. Someone call an ambulance. Caitlin shouted, her voice trembling as she fumbled with her phone, fingers slick with rain. Panic surged through her, a tidal wave of fear that threatened to drown her. The screen glowed ominously, but the signal flickered, a cruel reminder of their isolation in the park. I'm trying. Ashley cried, her own phone pressed to her ear, her brow furrowed in concentration. Come on, come on. Pick up. The urgency in her voice was palpable, and Liv could see the tremors in her hands as she clutched the device like a lifeline. Mary-Kate, what about yours? Liv turned to her friend, who was kneeling beside Brad, her fingers brushing his forehead, searching for warmth. The rain had soaked through their clothes, but Mary-Kate seemed oblivious, her focus solely on Brad. I can't get through either. Mary-Kate's voice cracked, her eyes wide with fear. What if he doesn't wake up? What if? Stop it, Paige interjected, her voice sharp, cutting through the rising tide of despair. We need to stay calm. He's going to be okay. We just need to get help. She took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Caitlin, try again. I'll look for a signal. Caitlin nodded, her heart racing as she dialed once more, the sound of the ringing echoing in her ears like a countdown. The seconds stretched into eternity, each one heavier than the last. She could feel the weight of her friends' eyes on her, their collective anxiety a palpable force. Please, please, she whispered under her breath, willing the operator to answer. Finally, a voice crackled through the line. 911, what's your emergency? Caitlin's breath caught in her throat. We need an ambulance. My friend was struck by lightning. We're at the park. Stay calm, I need your location, the operator instructed, and Caitlin's heart sank as she realized she had no idea where they were. It is. It is the park by Maple Street. There's a playground and... Is he breathing? The operator pressed, and Caitlin's gaze darted to Brad, who lay still, his chest barely rising and falling. I don't know. She stammered, panic clawing at her throat. He's not moving. Check for a pulse, the operator urged, and Caitlin dropped to her knees beside Brad, her fingers trembling as she pressed against his neck. Caitlin, what's happening? Ashley's voice was strained, her eyes wide with fear. I can't find it, Caitlin gasped, her heart pounding in her ears. I can't. Let me try, Mary-Kate said, her voice steadier than Caitlin felt. She leaned closer, her hands shaking as she searched for a pulse. The seconds felt like hours, and Caitlin could see the worry etched on her friends' faces, each of them grappling with their own fears. Please, Brad, Liv whispered, her voice barely above a breath. You have to be okay. Just then, Mary-Kate's face lit up with a flicker of hope. I think I feel it. It's weak, but it is there. Caitlin let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Okay. Just keep talking to him. Tell him to hang on. Brad, please, Mary-Kate urged, her voice trembling. You can't leave us. We need you. Just hold on a little longer. As they waited for the ambulance, a strange sense of normalcy began to creep in. What if we ordered a pizza? Paige suggested, her voice breaking the tension like a fragile glass shattering. I mean, it is what we always do when we hang out, right? It'll be like we're just having a regular day. Are you serious? Ashley shot back, disbelief coloring her tone. We're not going to order pizza while Brad is. While Brad is lying here, yes, Paige insisted, her eyes fierce. We can't just sit here and wait. We need to do something, anything. It'll help us feel less helpless. Caitlin glanced at Brad, then back at her friends. Maybe it is not such a bad idea. It could distract us. And it might even bring some comfort. Fine, Ashley relented, though her voice was still laced with uncertainty. But I'm not paying for it. Neither am I, Liv chimed in, a hint of a smile breaking through her worry. Let's just split it. I'll call. As Liv dialed the pizza place, the tension in the air shifted slightly, a fragile thread of normalcy weaving through their chaos. The sound of the phone ringing was a welcome distraction, a reminder that life continued even in the face of uncertainty. Okay, what do we want? Liv asked, her voice steadier now. Pepperoni. Extra cheese. Everything, Caitlin said, her heart still racing. We need everything. Just make it a large. Got it, Liv replied, her fingers flying over the screen. And I'll tell them to hurry. We need it fast. As they waited for the pizza, the conversation turned to Brad, each girl sharing their fears and hopes. I can't believe this is happening, Ashley said, her voice barely above a whisper. What if he doesn't wake up? What if? Stop it, Caitlin interrupted, her tone firm. He's going to be okay. He has to be. But what if he's not? Mary-Kate's voice trembled, and Caitlin could see the tears pooling in her eyes. What if we never get to see him again? Don't say that. Paige snapped, her frustration bubbling over. We can't think like that. We have to believe he'll pull through. Yeah, Liv added, her voice soft but resolute. He's strong. He's always been strong. Caitlin nodded, her heart aching for her friends. We just have to keep talking to him. He can hear us. He needs to know we're here. The minutes dragged on, each second stretching into an eternity as they waited for the ambulance and the pizza. Chapter 4. The arrival of the ambulance. The storm had come and gone in a matter of minutes, leaving behind a surreal stillness that hung in the air like the aftermath of a bad dream. Brad lay on the ground, his body a crumpled heap, while the girls hovered around him, their hearts pounding in sync with the fading echoes of thunder. Caitlin, Ashley, Liv, Mary-Kate, and Paige had been caught in a whirlwind of panic, their laughter and stories replaced by frantic calls for help. The world felt both impossibly vast and painfully small as they waited for the ambulance, their minds racing with fear and uncertainty. Now, as the distant wail of sirens pierced the silence, a flicker of hope ignited within them. The girls exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of relief and dread. The pizza delivery was imminent, but it felt trivial compared to the gravity of the situation unfolding before them. Here they come. Liv shouted, her voice breaking through the tension. She pointed down the path, where the flashing lights of the ambulance cut through the dimming daylight like a beacon of salvation. The vehicle screeched to a halt, and the paramedics sprang into action, their movements precise and practiced. As they rushed toward Brad, the girls instinctively stepped back, forming a tight circle around one another, their hands clasped in a silent show of solidarity. "Stay strong, Brad," Mary-Kate whispered, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of the ambulance doors slamming open and the paramedics shouting instructions. "We're right here." Caitlin's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she watched the medics kneel beside him, their faces a mask of concentration. "What if he doesn't wake up?" she murmured, her voice trembling. "He will," Ashley replied, her tone firm, though her own heart raced with fear. "He has to." The paramedics worked quickly, assessing Brad's condition, their hands moving with a practiced efficiency that both comforted and terrified the girls. They could see the concern etched on the medics' faces, and it sent a chill down their spines. "Can you hear me, buddy?" one of the paramedics called out, gently shaking Brad's shoulder. "We're going to take care of you. Just hang in there." As they prepared to lift him onto a stretcher, the girls gathered closer, their hearts heavy with worry. "Good luck, Brad," Paige said, her voice breaking. "We love you." With a final glance at his friends, Brad was lifted onto the stretcher, his body still and pale. The paramedics secured him, their voices calm and reassuring, but the girls could see the urgency in their movements. "Let's go," one of the medics shouted, and the stretcher was wheeled toward the ambulance. "Wait," Liv called out, her voice rising in panic. "Where are you taking him?" "To the hospital," the medic replied without breaking stride. "We'll keep you updated." As the ambulance doors swung shut, the girls stood frozen, watching as the vehicle pulled away, its sirens wailing into the distance. A heavy silence settled over them, the weight of their worry pressing down like the storm clouds that had just passed. "Did that really just happen?" Caitlin whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Ashley replied, her brow furrowed. "But we need to get to the hospital. We can't just stand here." "Right," Liv said, shaking herself out of her daze. "But how? I don't even know where it is." Just then, the sound of a motorcycle engine roared to life, and the girls turned to see a delivery driver approaching, pizza boxes stacked high on the back of his bike. "Perfect timing," Mary-Kate said, forcing a smile despite the tension in the air. "At least we'll have something to eat while we wait for news." The driver dismounted, his face hidden behind a helmet. "Pizza for a bunch of girls," he called out, lifting the visor. "Hope you're hungry." Caitlin couldn't help but laugh, a sound that felt foreign in the wake of the chaos. "We're starving, but we might need to skip the pizza for now." "Are you serious?" the driver asked, his brow furrowing in confusion. "You ordered this, right?" "Yeah, but," Ashley began, her voice trailing off as she glanced back down the path where the ambulance had disappeared. "Our friend just got taken to the hospital. We need to go there." The driver's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "Oh man, I'm sorry to hear that. Do you need a ride?" "Would you?" Paige asked, her eyes wide with hope. "We don't know how to get there." "Hop on," he said, gesturing to the back of his motorcycle. "I'll take you." As the girls exchanged glances, a mix of relief and apprehension washed over them. They had been thrust into a whirlwind of emotions, and now they were faced with another choice. "Let's go," Liv said, her voice steady. "We can't just sit here." One by one, they climbed onto the motorcycle, squeezing together as the driver revved the engine. The wind whipped through their hair as they sped down the path, the park fading behind them. Caitlin clutched Ashley's arm tightly, her heart racing not just from the thrill of the ride but from the uncertainty that loomed ahead. "What if something happens to him?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the roar of the engine. "He's going to be okay," Ashley replied, though her own heart was heavy with doubt. "He has to be." As they approached the hospital, the towering building loomed ahead, its sterile facade a stark contrast to the vibrant park they had just left behind. The driver pulled up to the entrance, and the girls scrambled off, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and determination. "Thank you," Mary-Kate called out, but the driver was already speeding away, leaving them standing in front of the hospital, a world of uncertainty stretching out before them. "Okay, what do we do now?" Paige asked, her voice shaky as they stepped inside the cool, fluorescent-lit lobby. "We find out where they took him," Liv said, her expression resolute. "We can't just wait here." They approached the reception desk, where a nurse sat typing on a computer. The girls exchanged anxious glances, their hearts racing as they prepared to ask the question that weighed heavily on their minds. "Excuse me," Caitlin said, her voice trembling. "We're looking for Brad Thompson. He was brought in after an accident." The nurse looked up, her expression shifting from focused to concerned. "Let me check," she said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. The girls held their breath, the seconds stretching into what felt like an eternity. "Okay, he's in the emergency room," the nurse said finally, her voice calm but serious. "You'll need to wait." Chapter 5. A desperate ride. The storm had come out of nowhere, a sudden tempest that swept through the park, leaving behind a trail of chaos and confusion. Brad, their steadfast friend, had been struck by lightning, and the girls, Liv, Mary-Kate, Caitlin, Ashley, and Paige, were left grappling with the surreal aftermath. As the rain had poured down, they had clung to each other, their laughter replaced by frantic calls for help. The ambulance had arrived just in time, whisking Brad away, leaving the girls standing in the remnants of their shattered day. With pizza on the way and their hearts heavy with worry, they had realized they were lost, both physically and emotionally. Now, as the last echoes of thunder faded into the distance, the girls stood huddled together, their breaths mingling in the cool air, the scent of wet earth and petrichor surrounding them. They needed to get to the hospital, and fast. "Please, just take us to the hospital," Liv pleaded, her voice trembling slightly as she approached the pizza delivery driver, a young man with tousled hair and a look of bemusement on his face. "We'll give you a huge tip. Just, please." The driver, glancing at the 5 girls, could see the urgency etched on their faces. "I'm not supposed to. Please." Mary-Kate interjected, her eyes wide and pleading. "Our friend was struck by lightning. He's in the hospital, and we need to get there now." The driver hesitated, his gaze darting between the girls and the pizza box in his hands. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with tension. He could see the desperation in their eyes, the way they clung to each other as if one of them might disappear into the storm. Okay, he relented, shaking his head as if to clear it. "Just hop in. But you owe me big time." Thank you so much," Caitlin exclaimed, her voice a mix of relief and urgency as they scrambled into the backseat of the car, the scent of pizza and damp fabric filling the small space. As they settled in, the driver turned the key in the ignition, and the engine roared to life. The girls exchanged anxious glances, their hearts racing as they pulled away from the park, the familiar surroundings fading into the distance. "Do you think he's going to be okay?" Ashley asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She stared out the window, watching the world blur past, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. "He has to be," Liv replied, her tone firm but her hands trembling in her lap. "He's strong. He'll pull through." Mary-Kate nodded, but her brow furrowed in worry. "What if he doesn't? What if—" "Stop it," Paige interrupted, her voice sharper than she intended. "We can't think like that. We need to stay positive for him." The driver glanced back at them through the rearview mirror, sensing the weight of their conversation. "You girls are really close, huh?" he said, trying to lighten the mood. I remember when my buddy got hurt during a football game. We all thought he was a goner, but he came back stronger than ever. Yeah, but this is different, Ashley said, her voice cracking. This isn't just a game. He was struck by lightning. Right, the driver said, his tone shifting to one of seriousness. But you know what? Sometimes, people surprise you. Just keep that hope alive. As they drove through the city, the streets glistening from the rain, the girls fell into a tense silence, each lost in her own thoughts. The rhythmic thump of the tires against the wet pavement was the only sound, punctuated by the occasional honk of a horn or the distant wail of sirens. Finally, they arrived at the hospital, the imposing building looming ahead like a fortress. The driver pulled up to the entrance, and the girls wasted no time. They scrambled out of the car, their hearts pounding in unison as they rushed toward the sliding glass doors. Wait! The driver called after them, his voice rising above the chaos. You forgot your pizza. Keep it, Liv shouted back, her eyes wide with urgency. Just go. Inside the hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic hit them like a wave, mingling with the faint scent of coffee from the waiting area. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the faces of anxious families and weary nurses. Where do we go? Caitlin asked, her voice trembling as she looked around, overwhelmed by the starkness of the place. Over there, Mary-Kate pointed toward the reception desk, where a nurse sat typing on a computer, her expression impassive. We need to find out where Brad is. As they approached the desk, Liv felt her heart race. Excuse me, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. We're looking for Brad Thompson. He was brought in after being struck by lightning. The nurse looked up, her expression shifting from indifference to concern. One moment, please. She typed something into her computer, her fingers flying across the keys. He's in the ER. You'll need to wait here until someone can update you. Can we see him? Ashley asked, her voice rising with desperation. I'm sorry, but the doctors are still assessing his condition. It may take some time, the nurse replied, her tone professional but lacking warmth. The girls exchanged worried glances, their hearts sinking. How long? Paige pressed, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't say, the nurse replied, her eyes returning to the screen. Please have a seat, and someone will come to get you when they have information. Defeated, the girls turned away from the desk, their shoulders heavy with worry. They found a row of plastic chairs in the waiting area, the fluorescent lights casting a harsh glare on their faces. They sat in silence, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on them. I can't just sit here, Liv said, her voice breaking the silence. I need to know what's happening. Me too, Caitlin added, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. What if something's really wrong? Stop it, Mary-Kate said, her voice firm. We can't think like that. We have to believe he's going to be okay. But what if he's not? Ashley whispered, her voice trembling. What if we never see him again? Don't say that. Paige snapped, her frustration bubbling to the surface. We have to stay strong for him. He needs us to believe he'll pull through. The tension in the air thickened, each girl grappling with her own fears and doubts. Liv felt a knot tightening in her stomach, the weight of their collective anxiety pressing down on her. She wanted to scream, to cry, to do anything to release the pent-up emotions swirling inside her. Just then. Chapter 6. Chapter 6. Searching for Brad. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Liv, Mary-Kate, Caitlin, Ashley, and Paige stepped into the hospital's sterile lobby. The air was thick with the scent of antiseptic, a sharp contrast to the vibrant flowers and laughter they had shared just hours before. Their hearts raced, a frantic drumbeat echoing the chaos of the storm that had ripped through their day. Brad had been struck by lightning, and now they were here, desperate to find him, to see him, to know he was okay. "Where do we go?" Liv's voice trembled, her eyes darting around the bustling lobby, searching for any sign of familiarity in the sea of white coats and anxious families. "Let's just ask someone," Mary-Kate replied, her voice steadier than she felt. She stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, as if holding on to something solid amidst the uncertainty. A nurse, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, glanced up from her clipboard. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone professional yet kind. "We're looking for Brad Thompson," Caitlin blurted out, her breath hitching at the mention of his name. "He was brought in after the storm." The nurse's expression softened, and she nodded. "Follow the red line on the floor, then take a right at the end of the corridor. He's in room 204. But I must warn you, he's still being assessed." "Thank you," Ashley said, her voice barely above a whisper. The girls exchanged glances, a mix of hope and dread swirling in their eyes. They nodded in unison, determination igniting within them as they followed the red line, their footsteps echoing against the polished tiles. As they walked, the corridor stretched out before them, the walls lined with framed photographs of smiling families and children. Each image felt like a cruel reminder of the joy they had just lost. The fluorescent lights hummed softly, a constant reminder of the sterile environment that felt so foreign to them. "Do you think he's okay?" Paige asked, her voice breaking the silence. She walked slightly behind the others, her hands shoved deep into her pockets, as if trying to hide from the reality of the situation. "I don't know," Liv admitted, her heart pounding in her chest. I can't believe this is happening. One minute we were laughing, and the next." Her voice trailed off, the memory of the storm flooding back, the crack of thunder, the flash of lightning. Mary-Kate turned to her, her brow furrowed in concern. "We have to stay positive. He's strong, Liv. He'll pull through this." "Yeah, he has to," Caitlin added, her voice firm, though her eyes betrayed her worry. "We can't lose him. Not like this." They reached the end of the corridor and turned right, the anticipation building with each step. Room 204 loomed ahead, its door closed, a barrier between them and the answers they desperately sought. Liv's heart raced as she reached for the handle, her hand trembling. "Wait," Ashley said, her voice low. What if he doesn't want to see us?" "Are you kidding?" Mary-Kate shot back, her eyes wide. "He needs us. We're his friends. We can't just stand here." With a deep breath, Liv pushed the door open, the hinges creaking softly. The room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn tight against the outside world. A hospital bed sat in the center, and there, pale and still, lay Brad. "Brad!" Liv gasped, her heart sinking at the sight of him. He looked so fragile, wires and tubes snaking around him like a web. The beeping of the heart monitor was a stark reminder of the precariousness of life, each beep a reminder that he was still with them, still fighting. Caitlin rushed to his side, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch his. "Brad, can you hear me?" she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. He didn't respond, his eyes closed, his face pale against the stark white of the pillow. The girls gathered around him, their hearts heavy with worry. "Please, Brad," Ashley murmured, her voice cracking. "You have to wake up. We need you." Mary-Kate squeezed Liv's hand, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "He's going to be okay," she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as they stood vigil by his side, the silence in the room punctuated only by the rhythmic beeping of the monitor. Each beep felt like a countdown, a reminder of the time slipping away. What if he doesn't wake up? Paige finally voiced the fear that had been gnawing at them. What if this is it? Stop it, Liv snapped, her voice sharper than she intended. We can't think like that. He's going to wake up. He has to. Just then, the door creaked open, and a doctor stepped in, his expression serious yet compassionate. Ladies, I'm Drive, Harris. I'm here to assess Brad's condition. Is he going to be okay? Caitlin asked, her voice trembling as she stepped forward, her eyes wide with fear. Doctor, Harris glanced at Brad, then back at the girls. He's stable for now, but we need to monitor him closely. The lightning strike caused significant electrical trauma. We're doing everything we can. Can we stay with him? Ashley asked, her voice pleading. Of course, Drive, Harris replied, his tone softening. But I need to run some tests. I'll be back shortly. He stepped out, leaving the girls in a heavy silence. As the door clicked shut, Liv felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. What if he doesn't make it? She whispered, her voice breaking. He will, Mary-Kate insisted, though her own voice wavered. He has to. We can't lose him. The girls huddled closer to Brad's bed, their hands intertwined, drawing strength from one another. They shared stories of their favorite memories with him, laughter mingling with tears as they recounted the time he had tried to impress them with his terrible dance moves or the way he had always been the first to suggest a spontaneous adventure. Remember that time he tried to climb that tree and got stuck? Caitlin chuckled, wiping away a tear. He was so embarrassed when we had to call his dad to get him down. Yeah, and he swore he'd never climb a tree again, Ashley added, a small smile breaking through her worry. But we all know he would. He's always up for a challenge. As they reminisced, the atmosphere in the room shifted, the tension easing slightly as they shared their love for Brad. But beneath the surface, a current of fear still lingered, a reminder of the fragility of life. Chapter 7. Chapter 7. The heartbreaking news. The fluorescent lights of the hospital hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow that felt both foreign and suffocating. Caitlin, Liv, Mary-Kate, Ashley, and Paige stood huddled together in the hallway, their hearts racing as they clutched each other's hands. The chaos of the storm felt like a distant memory, replaced by the stark reality of the hospital's cold walls and the beeping machines that punctuated the air. Just moments ago, they had been laughing and sharing slices of pizza, but now, the weight of uncertainty pressed down on them like a heavy fog. Where is he? Liv's voice trembled, her eyes darting toward the nurse's station, where a flurry of activity seemed to swirl around them. They said he'd be in here. He has to be okay, Mary-Kate whispered, her fingers twisting nervously in her hair. He just has to be. The girls exchanged anxious glances, each one grappling with the fear that had settled in their chests. They had followed the red line through the hospital, their hearts pounding with every step, but now they stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. The air was thick with tension, and the faint scent of antiseptic lingered, a reminder of the fragility of life. Suddenly, a doctor emerged from a nearby room, his face drawn and serious. The girls instinctively leaned forward, their breaths hitching in their throats as they strained to hear his words. Code Blue in room 312, he called out, urgency lacing his tone. We're losing him. Panic surged through the group like a tidal wave, and Caitlin felt her heart drop into her stomach. No, 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 she whispered, her voice barely audible. She turned to the others, her eyes wide with terror. We have to go in there. We have to help him. Caitlin, wait. Ashley grabbed her arm, but Caitlin shook her off, propelled by a desperate need to see Brad, to make sure he was still fighting. She pushed through the door, her heart pounding in her ears, and the sight that met her was one she would never forget. Brad lay on the hospital bed, surrounded by a flurry of doctors and nurses, their faces a blur of concentration and urgency. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor filled the room, but it was growing fainter, each beep a reminder of the life slipping away. Caitlin's breath caught in her throat as she took a step closer, her heart racing with disbelief. "Brad!" she cried, her voice breaking. She reached out a trembling hand, but a nurse stepped in front of her, shaking her head. "Please, you can't be here," the nurse said, her voice firm yet sympathetic. "We're doing everything we can." Caitlin felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "No, he can't. He can't die." The words spilled out in a rush, a desperate plea that echoed in the sterile room. She felt the warmth of tears prick at her eyes, but she fought them back, unwilling to succumb to the overwhelming despair. "Caitlin, we need to step back," Liv urged, her voice trembling. "They're trying to save him." But Caitlin couldn't move. She was rooted to the spot, her gaze locked on Brad's pale face, the way his chest rose and fell with labored breaths. Memories flooded her mind. His laughter, the way his eyes sparkled when he smiled, the warmth of his hand in hers. She couldn't let that slip away. "Not now. Caitlin, please," Mary Kate said softly, stepping closer. "We have to trust them. They're doing everything they can." As if on cue, the doctor's voice rang out, cutting through the chaos. "We need to shock him again." Clear. Caitlin's heart raced as she watched the medical team spring into action. The defibrillator hummed ominously, and she felt a chill run down her spine. "Brad!" she screamed again, her voice raw with emotion. "Fight! Please, fight!" The doctor pressed the paddles to Brad's chest, and the room fell silent. Time seemed to stretch as they waited, the tension palpable. Caitlin held her breath, her heart pounding in her ears, praying for a miracle. "Clear!" the doctor shouted again, and the sound of the shock echoed in the room. Caitlin's heart sank as she watched Brad's body jerk, but the monitor remained stubbornly flat. Come on," she whispered, her voice breaking. Please, please." But the doctor's expression shifted, and Caitlin felt a cold dread wash over her. "We're losing him," he said, his voice heavy with finality. "We need to call it." "No," Caitlin screamed, her voice cracking as she stumbled back, the world spinning around her. You can't just give up." The nurse stepped forward, her eyes filled with compassion. "I'm so sorry. We did everything we could." Caitlin felt her heart shatter, the pieces scattering like glass around her. She turned to the others, her breath hitching as she saw the horror mirrored in their faces. No, this can't be happening." In that moment, everything felt surreal, as if she were watching a terrible movie unfold. She had just been with him, laughing and joking, and now he was gone. The weight of the world pressed down on her, and she felt herself crumbling under the pressure. "Caitlin." Ashley's voice was soft, but it felt like a distant echo. "I'm so sorry." Caitlin's gaze fell to the floor, where the pizza box lay abandoned, a cruel reminder of the normalcy that had been shattered in an instant. She felt a wave of nausea wash over her, and before she could stop herself, she dropped the pizza she had been holding, the box hitting the ground with a dull thud. "Caitlin." Liv reached for her, but Caitlin stepped back, her heart racing. I can't do this." The tears she had been holding back spilled over, and she felt the warmth of them on her cheeks, mingling with the cold air of the hospital. "He was supposed to be okay," she choked out, her voice breaking. "He was supposed to be here with us." Mary Kate stepped forward, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We have to remember him, Caitlin. We have to hold on to the good times." But Caitlin couldn't hear her. All she could hear was the silence that filled the room, the absence of Brad's laughter, his voice, his presence. It felt like a gaping hole in her heart, one that would never heal. As the reality of the situation settled in, the girls gathered around Caitlin, their arms wrapping around her in a comforting embrace. They stood together, united in their grief, but Caitlin felt a sense of isolation creeping in. The world outside continued as normal. Chapter 8. Chapter 8. A tragic decision. The sterile scent of antiseptic hung in the air, mingling with the muted beeping of machines that seemed to echo the frantic rhythm of Caitlin's heart. The fluorescent lights above cast a harsh glare on the stark white walls of the hospital room, where the reality of their nightmare had settled in like a heavy fog. Just moments ago, they had been laughing in the park, surrounded by the warmth of friendship and the promise of a bright future. Now, that future felt as distant as the sun hidden behind the storm clouds that had rolled in so suddenly. Caitlin stood frozen, her eyes locked on Brad's still form, the once vibrant boy now eerily pale against the crisp white sheets. The doctors had come and gone, their faces grave, their words a blur of medical jargon that had left her reeling. "We did everything we could," they had said, but those words felt like daggers, each one piercing deeper into her heart. She could still hear the doctor's voice echoing in her mind. "I'm sorry. We lost him." "Caitlin." Liv's voice broke through the haze, trembling with concern. She reached out, her hand brushing against Caitlin's arm, but Caitlin barely felt it. The world around her had shrunk to a singular point of focus. The lifeless body of the boy she loved. "Caitlin, we need to talk. We can't just stay here like this." "Talk." Caitlin's voice was barely a whisper, thick with disbelief. "What is there to talk about?" "He's gone, Liv. He's gone." The weight of her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Mary Kate, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy from tears, stepped closer. "We need to think about what to do next. We can't just." "Can't just what?" Caitlin snapped, her grief morphing into anger. "Pretend everything is okay. Go back to our lives like nothing happened. He's dead. He's dead, and I can't." Her voice broke, and she felt the familiar sting of tears threatening to spill over. "Caitlin, please," Ashley pleaded, her voice cracking. "We're all hurting. We need to stick together. We can't lose anyone else." But Caitlin felt a darkness creeping in, a void that threatened to swallow her whole. She had always been the strong one, the one who held everyone together, but now she felt like a fragile glass figurine, ready to shatter at any moment. "What's the point?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "What's the point of anything without him?" The silence that followed was deafening, each girl lost in her own turmoil. Caitlin's gaze drifted to her purse, lying forgotten on the floor. It was a small, unassuming bag, but inside lay a decision that could change everything. She could feel it calling to her, a siren song that promised an end to the pain. "Caitlin." Liv's voice was softer now, filled with a cautious hope. "We can get through this. We just need to take it one step at a time." But Caitlin felt the weight of despair pressing down on her, suffocating her. She couldn't bear the thought of living in a world where Brad didn't exist. The laughter they had shared, the dreams they had built together. It all felt like a cruel joke now. She reached into her purse, her fingers brushing against the cool metal, and in that moment, everything shifted. "Caitlin, what are you doing?" Mary Kate's voice was laced with panic as she caught sight of the glint of steel. "Put that down." But Caitlin was already too far gone, the darkness wrapping around her like a shroud. "I can't live without him," she said, her voice steady, resolute. "I won't. Caitlin, please." Ashley's voice rose in desperation, but it was too late. The gun felt heavy in her hand, a weight that both terrified and comforted her. She could feel the tears streaming down her cheeks, but they were no longer tears of sadness. They were tears of release. In that moment, the world around her faded away, and all she could see was Brad's face, his smile, the way his eyes sparkled with mischief. "I love you," she whispered, the words a prayer, a promise. And then, with a final breath, she pulled the trigger. The sound echoed through the sterile room, a deafening crack that shattered the fragile silence. Caitlin's body slumped to the floor, the gun slipping from her fingers as the life drained from her eyes. The other girls screamed, their voices rising in a cacophony of horror and disbelief. "Caitlin!" Liv cried, rushing forward, but it was too late. The weight of grief had claimed another soul, and the room was filled with the acrid scent of gunpowder, mingling with the sterile air. Ashley stood frozen, her heart racing as she processed the scene unfolding before her. The world felt surreal, as if she were watching a nightmare play out in slow motion. "No, no, no," she whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. "This can't be happening." Mary-Kate fell to her knees, her hands trembling as she reached for Caitlin's lifeless body. "What have you done?" she sobbed, the words a broken plea. "What have you done?" But the answer hung heavy in the air, a cruel reminder of the fragility of life. The darkness that had claimed Caitlin now loomed over them all, a shadow that threatened to engulf them in its despair. Ashley felt a surge of panic rising within her, a primal instinct to escape the suffocating grief that surrounded her. Without thinking, she turned and bolted toward the nearest window, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She just needed to get away. "Ashley, wait!" Liv shouted, but her voice was lost in the chaos. The glass shattered as Ashley leapt through the window, the world outside rushing in like a tidal wave. The wind whipped around her, a fierce embrace that felt both liberating and terrifying. She was free, free from the pain, free from the memories that haunted her. But as she fell, time seemed to slow, and in that fleeting moment, she realized the gravity of her decision. The ground rushed up to meet her, and she felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. She was leaving it all behind. The grief, the guilt, the unbearable weight of loss. And then, darkness enveloped her. The hospital room fell silent, the echoes of despair lingering in the air like a ghost. Liv and Mary-Kate stood frozen, their hearts racing as they processed the horror that had unfolded before them. The weight of their loss pressed down on them, suffocating and relentless. "Is this really happening?" Mary-Kate whispered, her voice trembling. "Is this really our lives now?" Chapter 9. A chain reaction. The air in the hospital was thick with the scent of antiseptic and the muffled sounds of hurried footsteps and distant beeping machines. Just moments ago, Caitlin had been a vibrant part of their group, her laughter ringing like music in the park. Now, the echoes of joy had been replaced by the haunting silence of loss. Mary-Kate, Paige, and Liv stood in the sterile corridor, their hearts heavy with grief, the weight of their reality pressing down on them like a leaden blanket. Caitlin's sudden act had shattered their world, leaving them reeling in shock. The image of her lifeless body lingered in their minds, a ghost that refused to fade. They had come to the hospital to support Brad, to fight for him, but now they were left with a void that felt insurmountable. Mary-Kate's breath quickened as she approached the window, her heart racing. She peered down at the street below, where the chaos of the world continued, oblivious to the tragedy that had unfolded just moments ago. The pavement glistened with rain, reflecting the gray sky above, and for a moment, she felt a strange sense of detachment, as if she were watching a scene from a movie rather than living it. "Mary-Kate, don't." Paige's voice cut through the haze, panic lacing her words. She rushed forward, her hands trembling as she reached for her friend. "Please, step back from the edge." But Mary-Kate was lost in her thoughts, her mind racing with memories of laughter and love, of moments that now felt like they belonged to another lifetime. The world felt impossibly heavy, and the urge to escape the pain was overwhelming. Why did she do it? Mary-Kate whispered, her voice barely audible. Why didn't we see it coming? Paige's heart ached at the sight of her friend, so fragile and broken. We couldn't have known. We were all in shock. We need to stick together, okay? We can't lose anyone else. But as she reached out to pull Mary-Kate back, her foot slipped on the slick floor, and in a moment of panic, she stumbled forward, her hands instinctively pushing Mary-Kate away. Time slowed as Mary-Kate teetered on the edge, her eyes wide with horror. No, Liv screamed, rushing forward, but it was too late. Mary-Kate lost her balance and fell, her scream echoing in the corridor as she disappeared from sight. Liv's heart dropped into her stomach, a visceral reaction that left her breathless. What just happened? She gasped, her mind racing to comprehend the chaos that had unfolded in mere seconds. Paige stood frozen, her hands trembling as she stared at the empty space where Mary-Kate had been. I didn't mean to. But Liv wasn't listening. The world around her blurred as she felt an overwhelming urge to follow her friends, to escape the suffocating grief that threatened to consume her. We can't let this happen again. She shouted, her voice raw with emotion. In a moment of despair, Liv grabbed Paige's hand, her grip fierce and unyielding. We have to go. We can't stay here. Paige's eyes widened in shock, but Liv's determination was infectious. They both turned toward the window, the ground below calling to them like a siren's song. Together, Liv said, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside her. Together, Paige echoed, and with one last glance at the hospital that had become a prison of sorrow, they leapt out into the unknown. The world outside was a blur of colors and sounds, the wind rushing past them as they fell. For a fleeting moment, they felt weightless, free from the pain that had anchored them to the ground. But as the ground rushed up to meet them, reality crashed back in, and the finality of their decision settled like a heavy stone in their hearts. The impact was jarring, a violent collision that shattered the fragile illusion of freedom. Liv gasped as pain radiated through her body, her vision blurring as she struggled to comprehend what had just happened. She lay on the ground, the cool pavement pressing against her skin, and for a moment, she thought she might be dreaming. But the sharpness of the pain was all too real. She turned her head slightly, her heart racing as she searched for Paige. Paige, she croaked, her voice barely above a whisper. Liv. Paige's voice was frantic, and Liv felt a rush of relief at the sound. Are you okay? I think so, Liv replied, though the pain in her leg suggested otherwise. She tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness washed over her, and she collapsed back onto the ground. Stay still, Paige urged, her voice trembling. Help is coming. Just hold on. Liv closed her eyes, the world around her fading in and out of focus. She could hear sirens in the distance, a haunting wail that echoed the chaos of their lives. Memories flashed before her eyes. Brad's laughter, Caitlin's smile, the warmth of friendship that had once felt unbreakable. Why did we do this? Liv whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. What have we done? I don't know, Paige admitted, her voice breaking. I thought we could escape the pain. I didn't want to lose anyone else. But as the sirens grew louder, Liv realized that they had only compounded their grief. They had jumped into the abyss, and now they were left to face the consequences of their actions. The hospital was a whirlwind of activity as paramedics rushed to the scene, their voices a blur of urgency and commands. Liv felt herself being lifted, the world spinning around her as she was placed on a stretcher. She caught a glimpse of Paige being attended to nearby, her face pale and drawn. Stay with me, Liv, a paramedic said, his voice steady and reassuring. You're going to be okay. Just breathe. But Liv couldn't breathe. The weight of their choices pressed down on her, suffocating her with guilt and despair. She had wanted to escape, to find freedom from the pain, but now she felt more trapped than ever. As they wheeled her into the hospital, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glare on the sterile walls. The familiar scent of antiseptic filled her nostrils, and she felt a wave of nausea wash over her. "Where's Brad?" she managed to ask, her voice hoarse. The paramedic exchanged a glance with his partner, and Liv's heart sank. "He's being treated. We'll get you stabilized, and then we'll find out more, okay?" But Liv knew. She could feel it in her bones. They had lost Brad, Caitlin, and Mary-Kate, and now they were teetering on the edge of losing themselves. Chapter 10. Chapter 10. The final goodbye. The storm had come and gone, leaving behind a haunting silence that echoed through the sterile halls of the hospital. Just hours before, laughter had danced in the air, vibrant and carefree, as Brad, Liv, Mary-Kate, Caitlin, Ashley, and Paige had basked in the warmth of friendship under the sun. But now, that warmth felt like a distant memory, swallowed whole by the darkness that had descended upon them. The girls had faced the unthinkable. A lightning strike that had taken Brad from them, followed by a cascade of despair that had shattered their lives in an instant. As they stood in the hospital corridor, the fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting an eerie glow on their pale faces. The air was thick with the scent of antiseptic and the faint, sterile tang of fear. Each girl was lost in her own thoughts, grappling with the weight of their loss, the enormity of what had just transpired. Caitlin, once the life of the party, now stood at the edge of the group, her eyes vacant and hollow. The vibrant spirit that had always shone in her was dimmed, replaced by a profound emptiness. She felt as if she were floating, detached from reality, her heart a heavy stone in her chest. "Caitlin." Liv's voice broke through the silence, trembling with concern. "Are you okay?" Caitlin turned slowly, her gaze meeting Liv's. "How can I be okay?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He's gone. Brad is gone." The words hung in the air, a cruel reminder of the truth they all faced. Liv stepped closer, her heart aching for her friend. "We need to stick together. We can't let this tear us apart." Mary-Kate, still reeling from the chaos, nodded in agreement. "We have to remember him. We owe him that much." Ashley, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy from tears, wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. "But how? How do we remember someone who's not here anymore?" Paige, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up, her voice trembling. "We can talk about him. Share our favorite memories. It might help." The suggestion hung in the air, a fragile thread of hope amidst the despair. They all knew that sharing memories could bring comfort, but the thought of reliving those moments felt like a double-edged sword. "Okay," Liv said, her voice steadier now. "Let's do it. I'll start." She took a deep breath, her heart racing as she recalled the countless adventures they had shared. "Remember that time we all went camping? Brad tried to impress us by starting a fire, and he ended up setting his sleeve on fire instead." A small, bittersweet smile crept onto Caitlin's face, and the tension in the room eased just a fraction. "I remember. He was so embarrassed, but he laughed it off like it was nothing." Mary-Kate chimed in, her voice soft but filled with warmth. "And he made us all s'mores, even though he burned half of them. I can still taste the charred marshmallows." Ashley chuckled through her tears, the sound a mix of sorrow and joy. "He was always so determined to make everything perfect, but it never quite worked out. That was what made him so him." As they shared their memories, the weight of their grief began to lift, if only slightly. They spoke of the laughter, the inside jokes, the moments that had defined their friendship. Each memory was a thread, weaving them closer together even as they faced the abyss of loss. But as the laughter faded, the reality of their situation loomed large once more. The hospital felt like a prison, the sterile walls closing in on them. They had come to say goodbye, but the finality of it all was suffocating. Caitlin's heart raced as she glanced toward the door that led to Brad's room. "I need to see him," she said suddenly, her voice filled with urgency. "I need to say goodbye." The others exchanged glances, a mix of fear and understanding passing between them. They all felt the pull, the need to confront the reality of their loss. "Okay," Liv said, her voice firm. "We'll go together." They moved as one, a small army of grief, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. The closer they got to Brad's room, the heavier the air became, thick with unspoken fears and the weight of their shared sorrow. As they reached the door, Caitlin hesitated, her hand hovering over the handle. What if he's not the same? Mary-Kate placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "He's still Brad. No matter what." With a deep breath, Caitlin pushed the door open, and the sight that greeted them was both familiar and foreign. Brad lay in the hospital bed, his face pale and still, the beeping machines a stark reminder of the life that had once pulsed within him. Caitlin's heart shattered all over again. She stepped forward, her breath hitching in her throat. "Brad," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." The others followed her, forming a circle around the bed, their hearts heavy with grief. They each took turns speaking, sharing their love and their regrets, their voices trembling with emotion. "I should have told you how much you meant to me," Ashley said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You were always there for me, and I never said thank you." "I wish we had more time," Liv added, her voice thick with sorrow. "We had so many plans, Brad. So many adventures left to go on." Mary-Kate's voice was barely above a whisper. "You were the glue that held us together. Without you, I don't know how we'll survive this." Caitlin reached out, her fingers brushing against Brad's hand, cold and lifeless. "I can't believe you're really gone," she said, her voice cracking. "I don't know how to live without you." As they stood there, the weight of their grief palpable, a sense of finality settled over them. They had come to say goodbye, but the goodbye felt impossibly heavy, a burden they were not ready to bear. Suddenly, Caitlin's breath caught in her throat as a thought struck her like lightning. What if we could bring him back? The others turned to her, confusion etched on their faces. "What do you mean?" Paige asked, her brow furrowed. "I mean, what if we could find a way to bring him back?" Caitlin's voice was frantic now, desperation creeping in. "There has to be something we can do." "Caitlin, that's not how it works," Liv said gently, but Caitlin shook her head, her eyes wild with emotion. "No, we can't just let him go like this. We can't." The room fell silent,